Hi, and welcome back to the layout. Today, I'm really excited to share another tutorial with you, and this is going to be a weathering tutorial. I'm going to share a few tips and tricks for weathering, how to make your car stand out in a train, and then also just how to add a little bit of realistic graffiti. And one really important thing about this tutorial is I'm going to be using supplies and materials that I think are available to all different modelers at all different skill levels. So you don't necessarily need an airbrush to get this look, or really anything fancy. You can do something just like this in your garage and basement with a couple of supplies and tools you can pick up at your local hobby store or Home Depot or Lowe's. So that's just kind of my goal with this. And then the model itself is an Atlas Automax Autorack car. It's one of their new releases. So the prototype is a relatively new car to the railroads. It's recently manufactured. So we're just going to give it a really light weathering job. You can see along the frame of the car, and then obviously the trucks and the ends are weathered as well. So it's just very light. It's going to make it stand out. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with the graffiti, and then while that dries, we're going to work on a couple other parts of the car. So for this graffiti, like I said, this is something that you can do at home. You don't need a fancy airbrush or anything like that, although you certainly can use an airbrush for this method. So to begin, we're going to use some masking tape to really create a stencil for the graffiti. So I'm freehanding it here, kind of just based on some pictures I've seen and a lot of trains that I've seen in real life. If you want some ideas for kind of the shape and overall outline of graffiti, just look at some pictures online. You should be able to find it with a quick Google search. I'm then going to cut it out, and the part of the stencil that we are going to use is actually the outside. So the inside is garbage, you can throw that away. We're going to peel it away and then simply apply it to the face of the car. One thing that you kind of want to be careful with is just to make sure that all the edges are pressed down so that none of the paint or overspray will get underneath the masking tape. We're then going to mask the rest of the car so that we don't accidentally spray anything else, and we'll begin spraying. I'm just using simple spray paints that you can pick up from your hardware store, although if you really wanted to, or if you have an airbrush, that's another great alternative. But like I said, I just wanted to make this tutorial something that's easy for everyone, and I know not everyone has an airbrush or has an experience with an airbrush, so this is just something I wanted to share that hopefully is kind of all-inclusive. So I'm using a couple different colors here, and you can see by using this method, we're able to really blend them together. I'm able to spray them over each other and without drying, and when you do that, it really lets them blend together and give you a neat effect. Now, while the graffiti paint is still drying, we can move on to other parts of this car, just being very careful not to touch the paint that we just sprayed. So we're going to remove the trucks. That's something that I think is really helpful for most weathering jobs. To do that, there's going to be a simple Phillips head screw in most of the trucks. You'll just undo that and then remove the trucks. I'm going to be using an airbrush for this part of the weathering, though like I said before, it's not totally necessary. You can achieve the same effect with some weathering powders. AIM is a great company that makes weathering powders, and those are available through Walthers or probably your local hobby store as well. That is simply just a powder, kind of like a makeup more or less, which you could apply to the train car and really get that same effect. But with airbrushing and weathering powders, one key thing to keep in mind is just that layers really add up to make the best effect. So instead of going really hard all at once, it's best to add 10 to 15 light, smaller layers to achieve the look you're going for. That way, if you mess up, you don't have to worry about having applied too much. You'll just mess up one of the smaller layers. Once everything is dry, including the paint for the graffiti, I'm going to give it a quick clear coat. I'm using Krylon Crystal Clear for that, and I'll put the product in the description below if you're interested in what I'm using. Now we're going to move on to our last and final step, and that'll be weathering the trucks. But before I say anything else, I'm going to have to stop and ask for your forgiveness, because this is going to be a do as I say and not as I do moment, and I'm going to recommend that you wear gloves. Clearly that's not the case here, but whenever you use this method to weather the trucks, it is really helpful to wear gloves. And as you can see, I'm just going back and forth, using my hands to control the trucks and then following it with the airbrush. This way you're able to spray both the truck itself and every aspect of the wheel as it turns. Once the trucks and wheels have been weathered and are dried, we can reinstall them onto the car, again using the Phillips head screw to hold them in place, and we'll just tighten it until it's moderately tight, but we want to make sure that the truck is still loose and can still turn as it goes around curved track. Lastly, we can finish off our graffiti. Now that everything's been dried and is clear coated, we can use a couple different pens, paint pens, or Sharpies to kind of get this effect. Today I'm using a black fine point Sharpie pen. However, you can use paint pens or any other type of Sharpie or pen that might work for you. However, just keep in mind that a Sharpie is going to work much better than a ballpoint pen. And another thing to keep in mind that's really important is to make sure that you clear coated the graffiti before this step. I've noticed that sometimes if you try to do this step and outline the graffiti letters and graffiti itself before you clear coat it, you can end up damaging the paint. So as you can see here, I'm just recreating letters. Again, this is kind of just based on prototype photos and real graffiti that I've seen. And one great thing about graffiti is that all graffiti artists are apparently not on the same level as well. So whether they're doing a big, graffiti piece or a small one, it can look good or bad, and so it doesn't really matter. I think I've found that you can't really mess up graffiti from what I've seen, because to be honest, I've seen some pretty silly looking graffiti pieces on train cars as well. And so although I don't endorse graffiti on train cars, I do think it is an aspect of the hobby that will add a little bit of realism. So like I said, again, it's not something that I enjoy seeing on the trains, but it's something that is fun to model and recreate on the layout and on these train cars. So as you can see here, I'm outlining the letters, and then usually there's kind of a shadow I've noticed behind the letters. So I'm recreating that again with the paint pen. We're not going to do it in this example for the sake of time, but if you want, you can come back and add some white highlights or different colors around the letters themselves or within them. And again, just look at prototype photos by searching for train car graffiti online, and you'll be able to get a better idea of how these things look in real life and how you might be able to add a little bit of extra detail. But for now, like I said, this is just a great way to recreate some good looking graffiti that is pretty easy to do with materials you can buy at your local hobby store without anything too fancy. Well, that just about wraps up this tutorial. Thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate your time today. And like I said, this was really hopefully all-inclusive. So whatever skill level you feel like you're at in the hobby, hopefully you're able to learn something from this and apply it to your own train cars. If you have any questions, let me know in the section below. And if not, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.